The modern United States is the most powerful nation in human history. With hundreds of military bases across the planet and nearly 40% of all global military spending, America stands at the center of a vast, interconnected system that touches nearly every corner of the globe. Its influence has shaped a world of unprecedented prosperity, technological progress, and despite constant tensions, an era of relative peace. But to understand how the United States reached this extraordinary position, we need to go back, far back, to a time when it was just a fragile collection of colonies fighting for survival on the edge of a vast continent. In the early years after independence, America was not a superpower in any sense of the word. It was isolated, divided, and preoccupied with its own expansion across North America. Over the next 70 years, the United States pushed westward in a relentless drive to reach the Pacific Ocean. This expansion, however, came at a horrifying cost: the forced removal and slaughter of countless indigenous peoples who had called the land home for thousands of years. By the mid-1800s, the young republic had grown immensely in size and power, but Americans were split over what should come next. Should they stop at the shores of the Atlantic and Pacific, or should they reach beyond? After the Civil War, the debate grew fierce. Some leaders, like Secretary of State William Seward, dreamed of turning the United States into a global empire. Seward managed to buy Alaska from Russia in 1867, but his efforts to acquire more like Greenland, Iceland, and parts of the Caribbean were blocked by Congress. Many Americans believed that overseas expansion was un-American. They called themselves anti-imperialists, opposing any attempt to conquer or rule over other peoples. For them, expansion meant entanglement in the messy politics of Europe and Asia, and the integration of what they called inferior races, a reflection of the deeply racist attitudes of the era. For decades, this anti-imperialist spirit held America back from becoming a global force, but history has a way of changing course. In the late 1800s, the Industrial Revolution transformed the nation's economy. Factories, railroads, and new technologies produced massive growth, and with it came the need for a more centralized government to manage it all. The federal state grew stronger, wealthier, and more capable of projecting power abroad. Presidents began to dream bigger, and none more so than William McKinley. In 1898, McKinley led the United States into war with Spain over Cuba, even though many Americans fiercely opposed it. The war was short, brutal, and decisive. Spain, once the world's greatest empire, collapsed and the United States took its place. In victory, America claimed Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Within just a few years, it annexed Hawaii, Wake Island, and American Samoa, took control of the Panama Canal Zone, occupied the Dominican Republic, and purchased the Virgin Islands. Practically overnight, the United States went from a continental power to a global empire. America now had territories, troops, and influence stretching across the Pacific and the Caribbean. It was no longer isolated, it was everywhere. And with this new reach came a new mindset: the idea that the United States had a duty to shape the world in its image. It began installing friendly governments in countries like Nicaragua and became a major voice in international diplomacy. World War I pushed America's influence even further. When the United States entered the conflict in 1917, its industrial and military power helped tip the balance and end the war. President Woodrow Wilson attended the Paris Peace Conference and tried to reshape the world with his vision of a League of Nations, a global organization designed to keep the peace. It was an idealistic and bold dream that through cooperation and law, war could be abolished forever. But back home, the Senate refused to join. Isolationism once again gripped the nation. America turned inward, focusing on the Great Depression and the chaos in Europe from afar, but isolation was no longer possible. Across the Pacific, Japan was rising fast, expanding its empire across Asia and threatening American territories and trade routes. The confrontation that followed culminated in the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor. Overnight, America was at war again, and this time, it would emerge utterly transformed. World War II made the United States the center of global power. Its cities were untouched by bombing, its economy boomed from wartime production, and it alone possessed the atomic bomb. As Europe and Asia lay in ruins, America found itself holding the future of the modern world in its hands. Determined to prevent another global catastrophe, the United States led the creation of a new world order. The United Nations was born an institution meant to settle disputes and stop wars of conquest before they began, but that wasn't all. In a quiet resort town called Bretton Woods, delegates from 44 allied nations gathered to design an economic system to prevent another Great Depression. The institutions that created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank became the backbone of global finance, and behind them all stood the United States, the architect and guarantor of this new order. But even as America built this new world, another power rose to challenge it. The Soviet Union, the wartime alliance between East and West, quickly turned to rivalry. The world split into two camps, one led by the capitalist United States, the other by the communist Soviet Union. The struggle between them would define the next 50 years. The United States adopted a policy called containment aimed at stopping the spread of communism everywhere it appeared. To protect Western Europe from Soviet invasion, America formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Around the world, it built alliances with countries like South Korea, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, seeing them as critical barriers to communist influence. And behind the scenes, the CIA carried out covert operations to install or support pro-American regimes in dozens of countries. From Iran to Nicaragua, from Afghanistan to Chile, the fingerprints of American involvement were everywhere. This was the Cold War, a global chess match fought not just with weapons, but with ideology, propaganda, and money. It pushed America to maintain a permanent military presence abroad, building hundreds of bases and deploying troops across the planet. By the time the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the United States had become something no country had ever been before, a truly global superpower, capable of projecting power anywhere, anytime. When the Soviet Union collapsed, some believed America would finally pull back. The enemy was gone, the Cold War was over. But that didn't happen. The military alliances, economic institutions, and global commitments built over decades remained firmly in place. Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton decided that America should continue to lead, believing its presence was essential to maintaining peace and prosperity in the post-Cold War world. NATO expanded eastward, the global economy became ever more intertwined, and Washington's support for allies like Israel and Japan continued uninterrupted. By the turn of the 21st century, the United States was not just a superpower, it was the superpower. Its culture, technology, and military influence defined the modern age. From Hollywood movies to Silicon Valley innovations, the American presence could be felt in every country, in every language, in every life. And yet, beneath the surface, questions began to grow. Could America sustain this role forever? Was the cost both financial and moral too high? Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan tested the limits of American resolve. The 2008 financial crisis shook confidence in its economic leadership, and at home, growing political divisions began to question whether America's global mission still made sense. In 2016, Donald Trump brought that question to the center of American politics. For the first time since World War II, a president openly challenged the pillars of America's world order. He questioned NATO, criticized free trade, and argued that allies were taking advantage of American protection. It was a return, in many ways, to the old isolationist instinct, the belief that America should look inward, not outward. Whether Trump's ideas mark a permanent shift or just a temporary tremor remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the system America built after 1945 still shapes the world today. The military bases, the alliances, the economic institutions all remain in place, maintained by the world's most powerful nation. The question now is not how America became a superpower, but how long it can remain one. And before we go any further, if you're fascinated by stories like this, the rise and fall of empires, the hidden decisions that shaped our world, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. It's free, it helps more people find videos like this, and it keeps this history alive. Because the story of America's rise isn't just about wars and treaties. It's about ambition, belief, and contradiction, the dream of freedom that coexisted with conquest, the pursuit of peace through power, and the idea that one nation could somehow hold together a world always on the edge of chaos. From a small colony on the Atlantic coast to the heart of a global empire, the United States changed not just its own destiny, but the destiny of the entire planet. Whether that legacy will endure or fade is up to history to decide. And now, I want to hear from you. Do you think America's global dominance has done more good or harm for the world? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them.